Okay, thank you, Marguerite, for that generous introduction. And thanks to the Newfoundland Historical Society for the invitation to speak with you tonight. I need to give you a little warning at the outset. I'm going to ramble on for about 15 or 20 minutes with no obvious purpose. And I'm going to use a lot of new words that will sound very strange to your Anglophone ears. And so I'm asking for your patience and your complete attentiveness so that you can start to make sense of all of the detail I'm about to throw at you. So if you feel like you've jumped off the high dodge in the deep end and you're drowning in detail, please hang in there for about 20 minutes, and then maybe the object of tonight's lecture will start to become more clear. So I need this gadget. I'm drowning in technology. I want to start by talking about a man by the name of Tshakashue. Here's a photo of Tshakashue, and you can see that he's not Innu, and yet he has an Innu name. His Christian name is Hiram White, and he's from Mud Lake, Labrador. He's well known to Labradorphiles for his song "On the Wings of an Eagle," performed by the Flummies, among others. And it's not entirely clear what Tshakashue means. One theory is that it comes from the verb Tshakashue, meaning he or she shines brightly. Now, there's nothing surprising in Hiram White having an Innu name, because Labrador Innu gave lots of names to settler and Inuit folk in Upper Lake Melville and on the north coast of Labrador. Names like Kapapist, meaning the smiling one, for Andrew Lane; Atik, meaning caribou, for Tom Gear; Kamatapipat, meaning he who runs across a portage, for Morris Groves; and Kashpasit, meaning the one who licks, for an Inuit man from Hopedale; and Kachpanasht, for the one who almost blocks it with his hand, for Natan Fida, another Inuit man from Hopedale. And the Innu named many geographic features in Labrador after these people using their Innu names. Now, what is peculiar about Hiram White's Innu name is that it is also the name of this man on the right, also Tshakashue, also known as the late Charlie Rich, an ancestor of many Innu folks in Chehaji and Natwashish. The curly-haired Innu Tshakashue was originally from the Uapamekushtu, the Whale River area of the northern Quebec-Labrador Peninsula, that great expanse of barren grounds between Mushwoshibu, the George River, and Washkaganis, otherwise known as Fort Mackenzie. I've got a laser pointer here. I should use it. This great expanse of barrens in northern Quebec, Labrador. According to Sylvester Mackenzie, who was one of American anthropologist Frank Speck's Innu informants, the communal hunting range of these northern Innu was north of Little Whale River to Lake Mantou and Stillwater River, and then eastward almost to Kaniapaska River, which is about in here. But Speck noted contradictory information from another anthropologist by the name of William Duncan Strong, whose data warranted pushing the eastern line of the group to beyond Kaniapaska as far as the Whale River that flows northward into Ungava Bay, right in here. Did everybody hear me okay at the back? Yeah? In his family trees of the Davis Inlet and Barren Ground Innu he met on the north coast of Labrador in 1927 and 28, Strong recorded several people, including Tshakashue, who were originally from the White Whale River Band, the Uapamekushtu Inuits, White Whale River people. Speck concluded that there might well be some confusion in the identity of the names of the various rivers named from the whales. And that confusion continues to the present day, with a number of researchers assuming that the location of with a number of researchers assuming that the location is Uapamekushtu, which empties into Hudson's Bay, way over here. And that's a dangerous assumption, given the haziness of the Innu oral tradition with respect to this matter, and the thinness of the data available from written sources. While we may never know exactly where in the Quebec-Labrador Peninsula he came from, we do know that Charlie Tshakashue Rich moved with his family to Lake Melville, what the Innu call Atatrinabig, Cut Off Sea, where he camped beside the settler Tshakashue in the Gillards Bight area. Back in 2005 and 2000, this is Tshakashue, matshiteuieau. This is the area that we're talking about here. Back in 2005 and 2006, I was tasked to validate Innu place names doing fieldwork with Innu elders in Tshakashue and Natwashish. Most of the names had been collected by various people in the context of research projects going back to the mid-1970s. The validation work was part of a collaborative project with ethnolinguist Jose Mayo and linguist Margaret McKenzie that we called LabTalk. One of the names requiring validation was Tshakashue matshiteuieau, which is Tshakashue Point. Pian Panashwe, one of Tshishadit's most knowledgeable and respected elders, confirmed the name. It's the Innu toponym for Adams Point, which is on the west side of Gillards Bight. Pian said that it was named after Hiram White, and that Hiram had a homestead there at this location. So here's a few photos of Hiram White and various family members. A week or so after I'd been working with Pian, I visited a retired trapper from Northwest River, Louis Montague, who himself is a great repository of historical knowledge concerning the settler Métis and Innu people of Upper Lake Melville. I visit Louis from time to time to talk about old days and old ways. In any event, Louis told me that in December 1949 or thereabouts, he had been with his father at their cabin at the junction of Meshuggah and Kamikwakami-Shiwu. That's the Naskapi and Red Wine rivers, respectively. Right up here. That's the junction of the Red Wine River, Kamikwakami-Shiwu, and the Naskapi River, Meshuggah, that flows into the end of Grand Lake. The cabin was very near the long portage that the Innu call Anatratagan, meaning ascending portage. And here's what the portage looked like in 1991. And here's two Innu folks loaded up at the river's edge for the long portage to Nipissing, from whence they could travel to the central Labrador Plateau by way of Atchipanabe or Seal Lake, or the north coast by way of Ashtinikamook, which means canoe building shelter. There's a picture of Ashtinikamook. The official name Snigamook for this lake is a borrowing from Innu. A version of this name appears in the Jesuit Relations in 1643, but I digress. Louis remembered the day when Charlie Tshakashue Rich and his family appeared at the end of the portage. Tshakashue carrying a map of the travel route drawn by another Innu. Louis's father, who could speak some Innu, spoke with Tshakashue, but could tell that his dialect was quite different from that of the Innu who were customarily associated with Chehaji and the HBC trading post at Northwest River. Henceforth, Tshakashue and his family camped at various locations on the south shore of Atatrinabig, or Lake Melville. This big body of water there. Including Gillards Bight, very close to the other Tshakashue, Hiram White. Louis remembers camping beside the Innu Tshakashue and his wife at Fish Lake, where Louis fell sick with pneumonia-like symptoms, and where Tshakashue's wife treated him with a medicinal broth of boiled spruce boughs. In any event, when I heard this story, I got to thinking that maybe there had been a mistake, that Adams Point had in reality been named after the Innu Tshakashue and not the white one. So I returned to Pian Panashwe to seek clarification. And with what appeared to me as bemused patience, Pian explained that while it might sound funny, Adams Point really and truly is named after the Tshakashue from Mud Lake, Hiram White. So there you have it, two Tshakashues living side by side, one Innu, the other settler, with a point named after one of them, but it's the white guy and not the Innu guy whose name applies. but I'm not finished with Tshakashue. Tshakashue had a brother by the name of Tshwanjish, who was reputedly a Kamitushi, a Kamitu, a shaman and adversary of the late Wajijish, whose Christian name was Sylvester Pope. This is a picture of Wajijish on the left there, and his wife, Tshakashkue. Wajijish was the last shaman among the Labrador Innu. He died in 1971, having performed his last shaking tent ceremony in November 1969 at Ushpin Shibis, a tributary of Matshiteuieau, the Churchill River. According to Uapamekushtu, Tshwanjish had transformed himself into a wolf one fall and was harassing Innu at their camp at Uapamekushtu, the Mealy Mountains area. Uapamekushtu means white mountain across. He had tried to kill Wajijish using his power. On the way to Tshakashue the following spring, the wolf followed Wajijish's daughter, Nishet, and others as they walked across the route. When they arrived at Kaminosekas, which is the name of a marsh on the way to Tshakashue, Wajijish hung back and waited for the wolf to go by as it followed their tracks. And Wajijish shot the wolf as it passed. And shortly thereafter, they heard that Tshwanjish had died. Nishet is the wife of Uapamekushtu. While I know of no geographic feature carrying Tshwanjish's name, we do have a lake named after his wife, Uapamekushtu, also from the northern Uapamekushtu region. And she is buried at this lake, which bears her name. Tshakashue, which means Tshakashue Lake. Wajijish had an older sister named Tshakashkue, who was married to a man from the Uchimasi, or the Davis Inlet area, by the name of Meshkana, otherwise known as Sam Rich. The last Kamitu, the last shaman among the Innu who traded at Amish, or Boise's Bay, and Uchimasi, Davis Inlet. Meshkana was a powerful man and feared by a number of Innu. He was born about 1883 and died in 1957. The Innu have given his name to a lake in Labrador called Meshkana Kawi Chiwepatit, meaning where Meshkana turned back on the Komatik, this location. This is where the smaller reservoir is now, Mishikamal Lake or Michikamal. There's Natwashish, Davis Inlet area in the north coast, Goose Bay is down here. So Meshkana Kawi Chiwepatit is where he was, where Meshkana was in 1953, the last time he went to the country before his death. He could no longer walk, so his son Napayan Rich had to transport him on Komatik by dog team. Like Wajijish, Meshkana also fought with a shaman from Uapamekushtu. In fact, there is an important historic Innu gathering place in Big Bay that commemorates a battle between Meshkana and a Uapamekushtu shaman. It's called Kakushtatunanut, right up here in Big Bay. And that means where people were frightened. An interesting element in many of these stories about shamanic battles is that Innu from at least 3 regions, representing 3 distinct dialect groups, all single out Uapamekushtu Innu, or Uapamekushtu, as the source of hostile shamans. Remember that Tshwanjish and his brother, Tshakashue, both came from the Uapamekushtu area. And referring to Quebec Innu, Denis Gagnon notes that they were in contact with Uapamekushtu Inuits, whose, quote, shamans are feared even more than the Inuit ones. Now, I have no satisfactory explanation for the frequent attribution of hostile attributes by southerly and easterly Innu to shamans from Uapamekushtu. Now, there are many, many stories about Meshkana, who is well remembered by the elders of Natwashish and Tshakashue. He is featured quite prominently in the late Georg Henriksen's collection of narratives from the late Kanwekaudat called I Dream the Animals, where we learn of his hostility to missionaries, hunting prowess, abilities in the shaking tent, and fights with cannibal beings known as Atchen and other Innu. In fact, Kanwekaudat blames him for the death of Mashkapesh, Manteo, and his own mother through the use of his shamanic powers. However, despite his reputation as a powerful, fearful, capricious, and at times harmful shaman, there was certainly a more compassionate side to the man that emerges from Kanwekaudat's narrative. Consider, for example, this story about the death of Ataka, whose Christian name was Joseph Ataka, at a camp near Ashwaubenon near the Quebec-Labrador border. We heard someone crying in our tent. This is the voice of Kanewegodat now, and this is from his perspective as a child. We heard someone crying in our tent. They took us to another tent, and later in the evening our parents told us that our grandfather had died. We weren't allowed to go out, and most of the elders stayed up all night. Ataka and Meshkina had been friends since they were young boys. Meshkina was crying as he missed his friend very much. The night before Ataka died, Meshkina knew that something was going to happen to his friend because the preceding night, Ataka sang and beat his drum. Meshkina had been in his tent sleeping when his oldest wife woke him up saying, "Meshkina, get up, your friend is still singing with his drum." Then Meshkina got up and heard his friend still singing. Meshkina didn't waste his time in finding what was going on. He didn't have to go to his friend's tent. And Meshkina told his wife, "There is nothing I can do. The song that he sings is his last one." Meshkina said, "We had a long night and he sang all his hunting songs." "My friend is gone," Meshkina said. "He will not be with us very long. He got rid of all his hunting songs." Here's a couple of photos of Ataka and his three wives. Mani, Tshakashkue, and Panache. Mani, Tshakashkue, and Panache. Now there's a mountain named after Ataka. This will work. Yes. Okay. There's a mountain named after Ataka in the interior of Labrador, in the interior Labrador plateau, called Uapamekushtu, which means Ataka's mountain. And the story goes that Ataka walked up this mountain and was soon followed by his lover and first wife, Tshakashkue. It is said that they went up the mountain to make love. And there's a huge rock on the top of the mountain which is called Ataka Utashanam, meaning Ataka's rock. And there's also a feature, a lake named after Tshakashkue. It's called Tshakashkue Kapekupikut. Sounds like a tongue twister, like Peter picked a peck of peppers. Tshakashkue Kapekupikut. I have trouble with that one. It means where Tshakashkue was roughed up, which is where she tumbled head over heels when she fell off her toboggan. And again, for those of you whose familiarity with Labrador geography may not be the strongest, Uspe is here, north coast, Michikamal Lake, smaller reservoir, and there's Tshakashkue Kapekupikut and Ataka Uapamekushtu, all in this area. Let's get back to Meshkina. His family tree is quite interesting. First of all, his older brother, Edward Rich, was also a powerful shaman, but one generally not associated with bad deeds. Edward's Innu name was Mishtanabish. And incidentally, Mr. Nabish had a bilingual son by the name of Shoshapish, or Joe Rich, who was the chief of Uapamekushtu, Davisinlet, when my late colleague, the Norwegian anthropologist Georg Henriksen, arrived there to commence field work in 1966. Not soon after Georg's arrival, Joe Rich walked up to him and asked, "Do you know my good friend William Duncan Strong?" And this is 40 years after Strong had lived among the Innu. In any event, Meshkina and Mr. Nabish's father was Edward Rich Sr., called Mantesh by the Innu. On his 1906 trip of gentlemanly exploration in northern Labrador, the Bostonian lawyer William Brooks Cabot visited old Edward at his camps at Opetik and the mouth of Notikwan Shibu to query him about inland travel and to recruit his sons as guides. And you can read all about it in Cabot's book Labrador, published in 1920. The mouth of the Notikwan River and Opetik there. Baptized by Father Babel at Episcopal in 1867, this is the same man who is referred to as Edward Richards in the HBC Post Records for Northwest River. He was an employee of the HBC, the Hudson's Bay Company, at this post between 1869 and 1876, and formerly of Fort Mascapy between 1846 and 1862. and he turns up in HBC Davis Inlet records for 1909. As noted by José Maillot, Matshiteuieau has left his mark on the toponymy of the Churchill River Valley. The place where he often set up his winter quarters is called Edward Chivis, meaning Edward's Brook. This is a picture of Edward's Brook taken along the Trans-Labrador Highway. Edward, or Matshiteuieau's father, was a half-Cree, half-Scot by the name of Ned Richards, originally from James Bay, who had married an Inuit woman by the name of Betsy, or Habininik from Kuujjuaq in Ungava Bay. And in fact, they are the progenitors of many of the riches of Natwashish and Chishaji. Charlie Rich's line, on the other hand, the Tshakashue's line, on the other hand, is completely separate, and it's a mystery as to how he ended up with the name Rich. Born around 1850 in the Moose Factory, James Bay area, Ned Richards is mentioned several times in the unpublished manuscript of Henry Connolly called Reminiscences of One of the Last Descendants of a Bourgeois of the Northwest Company, where Connolly refers to him as the hero of the Hannah Bay murder in 1832. Now, Ned was certainly a survivor of the massacre, but whether he was a hero or not is open to question. While in the Upper Lake Melville area, Edward Rich, or Richards, otherwise known as Matshiteuieau, married an Innu woman by the name of Manianashimi, the daughter of Tomaashimi, who is referred to as the chief of Eskimo Bay in the HBC records. His Innu name was Chenuashimi, and he was a Kamatushi, a shaman. And he includes among his descendants 3 shamans, Antoine Ushkun, Shabadish Ashimi, and Antoine Ashimi. 840. Okay, so as promised, I've been rambling on for about 15 or 20 minutes, talking about several different people from the Innu oral tradition and events concerning them that took place at numerous locations throughout the Quebec-Labrador Peninsula, what the Innu call Tasinan. We jump from the settler Hiram Tshakashue White to Charlie Tshakashue Rich, to Twangish's wife, Chiweanaqueo, to Wajijish, Meshkana, Atika, Nasiushqueo, Edward Matshiteuieau Rich, and Ned Richards, mentioning the names of Kanwikodat, Mashkapesh, Montel, Nishet Panashwe, Pierre Panashwe, Louis Montague, William Brooks Cabot, Frank Speck, William Duncan Strong, Georg Henriksen, Father Babel, Marian Ashini, Chenyu Ashini, and several other Innu along the way. I've needed 30 Innu toponyms and a handful of English ones to get us to this point in the talk tonight. And the geographic area covered takes us from the coast of James Bay to Ungava Bay in the north, the north coast of Labrador, the Mealy Mountains, and the central Labrador Plateau by way of Mistachibu or the Churchill River. And in fact, I could easily extend the geographic coverage by pursuing various tangents from my storyline. For example, the shaman Wajijish had a brother by the name of William Pokwe, who was associated with the Hudson's Bay Company trading post at Pukachibu or St. Augustine on the Quebec North Shore. The two communicate a long distance by way of the shaking tent. Wajijish's wife, Manikanegishqueo, is a pastichi with connections to Unamen Shibu or Laromen on the Quebec North Shore. Edward, or Matshiteuieau Rich's father-in-law, Chenyu Ashini, was baptized in Ekwanji, Mingan, here, on June the 26th, 1865, while one of his sons, the aforementioned Antoine Ushkun, ended up in the cemetery at Washat, or Setio, in July 1931. So the geographic extent of this storied landscape is colossal, 1,500 kilometers east to west, and 800 kilometers north to south. And it speaks to the great historic mobility and connectedness of the Innu people. This map illustrates a bit better what I mean by historic connectedness of the Labrador Innu people. The red lines on this map are kinship connections between Tshakashue Innu and Cree and Inuit people in other parts of the Quebec-Labrador Peninsula. So this is therefore a kinship map that we can layer on the toponymic one, which is itself layered on the topographic map of this immense territory. You start your historic travels with any one of the individuals mentioned in my narrative tonight, or any one of their descendants, and you will end up with a web of relations that quickly fills the geographic space known as Labrador, Quebec. And similarly, if you start with any number of Innu toponyms, Innu place names, you could well be taken for a lengthy voyage of historic and ethnic discovery. In this sense, many of the Innu place names are like Winashkwatuk, marmot holes, in that they lead you into a labyrinth of meaning and historical association, with exits in sometimes surprising places. You can see why, then, toponyms serve as mnemonics of contemporary and historic land use for Aboriginal people. And although they are archived in rapidly shrinking oral traditions, toponyms continue to provide portals to vast quantities of memory about particular places on the landscape. As noted by Darren Keith, place names aid in the appropriation of the landscape by an Aboriginal society. Naming is a creative process that anchors a society to a specific geographic area and acts to integrate the group socially, implying collective rights, privileges, and stewardship. In addition, it broadcasts these territorial limits and implications to adjacent societies. And I myself witnessed matshiteuieau, the Uapamekushtu, use Innu place names as part of his narrative strategy to broadcast Innu claims to rights in Newfoundland to representatives of Newfoundland Labrador Hydro at an information meeting in Tshakashue in November 2006. He started his lecture by reciting a lengthy list of toponyms for places he had seen throughout Labrador during his lifetime. In addition to the mnemonic function, place names entice us into the worldviews of other people. In this sense, we see that the Innu territory is populated not just by human beings, but by a variety of other than human beings as well. We caught fleeting glimpses of this other world when I mentioned the names of several Innu shamans, the shaking tent ceremony, Wajijish's victorious battle with Juanjish, the latter's ability to transform himself into a wolf, Ataka dying after he sung all his drum songs, and Kaniwekadet's assertion that Meshkina had killed a number of Innu, including his mother. More explicitly, this is the world of the matshiteuieau, the animal masters, and other beings with whom traditionally minded Innu engage in social relations, and towards whom they must show great respect or else risk starvation and other misfortunes. It is in fact one world saturated with personal powers and embracing both humans, the animals and plants on which they depend, and the features of the landscape in which they live and move, to quote anthropologist Tim Ingold. The world of the animal masters and other beings is a political one to the extent that these beings can insert themselves into public discourse and public policy decision-making processes in the face of the powerful union of Western science and industrial resource extraction. And if you doubt this proposition, consider the evidence from the joint review panel hearings concerning the Lower Churchill project in Tshakashue a month ago, during which Francis Panashwe publicly asserted that the matshiteuieau and the other beings constituted, quote, Innu government before Joey Smallwood. And his uncle, Pian Panashwe, cautioned most vigorously that the matshiteuieau beings who reside here at Mantochu, beside Churchill, beside Muskrat Falls, would destroy the proposed Muskrat Falls hydro dam. Giant orange yellow otter-like beings, the matshiteuieau, are said to be able to travel anywhere in the water and are able to break through the ice. They can also travel under the ground and through rocks. So that's called Mantochu, and this is Muskrat Falls here, and the dam structure would be anchored to this structure. Here's another abode of powerful other than human beings. It's called Armitage, high in the Uapamekushtu Mountains area. Mamekushtu are a class of human-like beings who reside among boulders and cliffs and caves, particularly these vertical rock faces that fall straight into the water. Older Tshakashue Innu say that they are really ugly, having two-dimensional faces with their eyes on one side. They have language, and they understand Innu and Moon. Older Innu throughout the Quebec-Labrador Peninsula know these beings, as do older James Bay Cree and Ojibwe or Anishinaabe as far west as Manitoba. And they are associated with rock paintings that you find throughout much of the boreal north of Canada. Now, Mamekushtu is the only location in Labrador where Mamekushtu reside, as far as we know, based on testimony from Natwashish and Tshakashue Innu. However, Sylvie Vincent and Josephine Bacon report that Mamekushtu residences are found on the Quebec North Shore near Bay Johan Beats. Next. Okay. And here is yet another dwelling place of powerful Indian beings. This is Tshakashkue, the home of Uapamekushtu, the Toad Man, who resides there with his wife, Uapamekushtu, and children. Many older Innu people know that one must not point at this hill, otherwise the wind will come up on Mishkamau Lake. The late Nanny Anselma told me that they used to place a woman's scarf or some other material in the waters of Mishkamau for Uapamekushtu's wife, and this would make the waters right calm. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that all Innu place names concern other than human beings or individual people. In fact, of the 574 names in our database at the moment, only 50 places are named after Innu people, most of whom passed away many years ago. Another 40 or so places are named after Inuit, settlers, and traders whom the Innu had contact with over the years. Tshakashue matshiteuieau being the important one that I started this talk with tonight. Only a dozen or so places are named in reference to other than human beings who lived there or whom Innu encountered at some point in the past. After that, we have over 160 place names in the database that are directly related to Weishishuk or animals. And some examples here are Atchikatak, where there are seals, Notaguan, Shibu, porcupine hunting river. And here's some photos of cooperative technology. Some photos of Notaguan Shibu. Only a handful of place names are related to the parts of animals. Some examples are Atigwish, meaning caribou mesentery, or Wistadenabi, caribou rumen lake. An equally small number of place names relate to the tools, equipment, and technology used by the Innu when they were living in Nochimin in the country. And some examples are Kasitkaigan, square cash box, and let's say Unagan Shibis, meaning a deadfall trapped river, like a brook, a small river. Some of the names are concerned with Innu hunting, fishing, and collecting berries, for example. Ujashimek Gajgakwat Ganit, place where salmon were speared. And finally, we have a large number of toponyms that describe geographic features of the land and water, the mountains, the marshes, the bays, the rivers. And some examples are Kamishtasen, where it is all blown away. Tshakashkue, building like rock mountain. Or, let's say, Gauchisteshu Shibis, full of water lilies river. And here's a photo of Kamishtasen, which is, this particular hill is at the southwest corner of the Stassen Lake. And a photo of Tshakashkue. Tshakashkue Mountain has a cirque and a pond in the center, and the sides of the cirque around the pond are steep so that it looks like a baseball stadium. And it was a natural corral of sorts where Innu used to kill caribou during the winter months. Okay. I guess I should start thinking about a conclusion. Virtually all of the Innu place names I've shared with you tonight are documented online at this website. Margie McKenzie mentioned it in her introduction, called www.innuplaces.ca, where you can find a long list of credits and data sources for the toponymic research. It was launched in November 2008. Now, in setting up this website, I never intended it as simply a toponymic archive for a dying language or a storage box of ossified Innu folklore. Rather, it is meant to serve as a tool for those Innu who wish to maintain and revitalize an historic sense of place based in Nochimi, on the land, away from the reserved communities of Natwashis and Chishaji. It is a technology that can be used by Innu to reassert and reinvent local practices and imaginaries and their encounters with the multiple manifestations of the globe, should they so choose. And that's why its address is www.innuplaces.ca. The focus is on place, sense of place, and the toponyms, the place names, are simply the portals through which historic, personal, and other meanings are reached. Hence, there are many toponym records that include links to digital audio files of people telling stories about experiences associated with the toponym. Listen, for example, to the late Georg Hendrickson's account of facing starvation and extreme cold, breastfeeding Innu women, and finally a successful caribou hunt while at Kawinabashik in the late 1960s. And here's a couple of photos taken at Kawinabashik, one by Georg in the late 1960s, and the other by Siwo Young when we did our cross-Labrador ski trip through this area in 2002. We had Georg's photos and all the Innu toponyms for the route when we did this trip 9 years ago. So it was impossible to think of it as wilderness. The snowshoe prints of many people have been across this lake for hundreds, if not thousands of years before us. In setting up the Place Names website, we wanted to encourage younger Innu, as well as non-Innu, to use Innu toponyms so that we can arrest the practice of imposing English names. For too many years now, bush pilots, outfitters, mining companies, and other newcomers to the territory have been inventing names for geographic features that already have Aboriginal names. Examples include Banana Lake for Kamashakamat, Rocky Pond or Whitey's Pond for Mistashini, No Name Lake for Paypalkamau, Awesome Lake for Mistanabi, and 1155 for Nikanigau. This kind of symbolic and linguistic displacement has got to stop, particularly since younger Innu are using the English toponyms in ignorance of their own names. The website, therefore, is a tool for everyone to use, and I invite you to explore it. There's a phonetic pronunciation guide and audio clips where you can practice the pronunciations. Try the easier ones first. For example, Mene Napi, which is very close to the official place name, Minapi Lake, Mene Napi. It's an easy one, I think. Followed by something of moderate difficulty like this one, Uapamekushtu, the Innu name for the Mealy Mountains. And it's the Innu name of the proposed Mealy Mountains National Park. So you're going to hear that one more frequently as that park goes forward. And then, as you gain confidence and you want to be a bit more adventuresome, you can take on the big challenges like this one, Eshka Katspukadnit, which means we're hanging antlers blocked away, or maybe even this one. You want to try it? So there's an audio clip there, and you can practice and practice and practice until you've got it perfect. So I end with that. That's all for now. And I thank you for your patience. But I have a postscript, if you don't mind. A postscript of sorts. Within academic circles, the field of toponymy may not have been particularly sexy in recent years, But we should be grateful for the work of people like E.R. Seary, Bill Kirwan, Gordon Hancock, Bob Hollett, and Pep Wheeler for their significant contributions to the toponymy of the province. Of course, Seary and Wheeler have passed on, while Kirwan, Hancock, and Hollett have retired from the academy. And that leaves only Marguerite Mackenzie of the linguistics department with an active interest in toponymy, in her case Aboriginal. And Marguerite is getting long in the tooth herself. Forgive me for that, Marguerite, because she's left, I can say it. With the exception of Marguerite, there is currently no one at Memorial University with toponymic expertise, to the best of my knowledge. Who will continue the important toponymic work of these scholars in the future? What will it mean for us when Gordon Hancock retires from the chair of the Newfoundland Labrador Geographical Names Board? If you think that all the place name mysteries of the province have been solved, you are seriously mistaken, because there is a mountain of work to be done to record names, verify pronunciations, meanings, and spellings, and link them to oral traditions and sense of place. And I think we should all encourage Memorial University to hire new faculty with toponymic expertise. And this message should be targeted at the VP Academic, the Dean of Arts, and the Departments of Anthropology, English, Folklore, Geography, History, and Linguistics. So let's leave it at that. Thank you very much. I guess I have to do Q&A now, is that right?
Yes, please.
Oh, too bad.
Any questions?
Yeah.
On your radio interview, you mentioned that you hoped non-Innu pilots, air pilots, would start to use the old names and not anglicized names. Is there hope that they would use the website or something like that?
I don't think that it's been well publicized. I don't think very many people know about it. And even people themselves have some responsibility to promote this particular website, not just in their own communities, but throughout all of Labrador. I have a theory, it's unproven, that the Innu themselves would benefit it very much if non-Innu start using their names. And the status of their own names will go up if people of European origin start using these names. So there's a lot of work to be done there. And I note that in a way there's a lot of precedent, because thanks to the Moravians and I guess Pep Wheeler, we have a lot of Inuit place names in Labrador. I mean, there's a fair number of Innu ones as well, and everybody sort of stumbles along with a kind of pronunciation with them. And I don't know anything about Inuktitut, the Inuit language, and I'm sure my pronunciations are like bastardized, but we somehow arrive at a consensus about how to pronounce them. They're probably like the wrong pronunciations, but we get there. And there are many other parts of the country where we use Aboriginal place names. So I don't think we should be intimidated or fearful of having a few more on the map and making more of an effort to try and use them. But this website at least gives people some guidance as to the pronunciation. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm not going to ask a question, Peter. I'm just trying to make a comment.
Yeah.
I'm Bruce Ryan. I work with the Geological Survey.
Hi, Bruce.
And I'm glad you mentioned Pep, actually.
Yeah.
Delighted to hear Pep's name come up. What you were talking about the people, pilots and geologists and mining exploration people, so on, adding English names to features which already have local names, I find very disturbing. And if I see this in the literature, in their press releases, or if I hear them talking about it, I correct them whenever I can. For instance, Garotic Lake, which is west of Webbs Bay there in Labrador, will always come out in press releases as King Lake. And I would write these people and say, look, it is not King Lake, it's Garotic. We don't call Lake Superior Lake Soap. We don't call Twillingate Twill. So if you're going to write the name, write it properly. And same, there's another lake called Uapamekushtu, up just west of Sadvokar. And again, they were calling that Russian Lake because they could not learn or would not endeavor to try to pronounce the Inuit name. And I mean, that was well ahead of his time, I think, when he wrote that collection of Labrador place names that was published in 1953. That's a magnificent resource for people who don't know anything about the list of Labrador Eskimo place names. So, keep chastising these people whenever if they don't use the local names.
We can't function without place names. I mean, it's one of those aspects of culture, of everyday life that we take for granted. But I mean, at the end of the week, and add up the number of times that you use some kind of a place name. Even if it's like I went to the mall. The mall is a place name. You know, it's a little ambiguous which mall you're talking about, but we can't function without them. And I can understand that people who are doing mineral exploration or bush pilots, they need shortcuts. They need to have names. They can't operate without them. And there's a certain efficiency to, I guess, cooking up a quick and dirty English variant rather than making the effort to go to the Inuit or the Innu one. But at the same time, there's a certain arrogance and intellectual laziness behind that.
Well, the other thing, of course, is the lack of these names on topographic maps.
Yeah.
Right, that's which they use as navigation.
Yeah. Any other comments, questions? I feel very strongly about that postscript that I gave. Actually, I think that the university needs to respond to community need, and like I said, there's a lot more toponymic research to be done in this province. I don't know how you feel about this, Gordon, and maybe it's something you've given a lot of thought to. I really would like to see at least one person at the university or get hired at the university who follows in your footsteps, and that a number of the other scholars there. But I'm not sure how to get that done. Yeah.
Do you know if there's any interest, excuse me, among young Innu people? Are there any at the university who might be hired to, or who might have an interest in following up on it?
I know of one young Innu person from Tshakashue who's gone in the social science direction, but she's interested in archaeology. Now maybe she would branch off and show more interest in toponymy, but she has a ways to go yet. I think she's just finished up her third year with a major in archaeology. But we need more people like that because they're at least in theory the best place, particularly if they have their own language. They're the best place to carry on this work. But for some strange reason, I think this is fairly typical throughout northern Canada. Cultural work is not high status. People want to do other things. They want to become lawyers, bank council administrators, nurses, social workers, heavy construction operators, heavy equipment operators, I should say, so on and so forth. I haven't quite figured that out yet. Why cultural work seems to be lower status in these communities and people are less interested in it. But was there another question from you?
I was going to ask, just to sort of speak of my years I've spent, in Nain and the general area, is the Innu language being embraced by the younger generation, or is it not?
It's still quite strong in Newfoundland, which is what you would expect. But in more isolated communities, the language is stronger. Communities that are well connected to by road networks and whatnot, whether it's Tshakashue or matshiteuieau, Minga, and Tshakashkue on the Quebec North Shore, language is slipping fast there. And it starts in various ways with what's called code switching, for example. You replace an Innu word with an English one. And the younger people don't have even basic vocabulary for the land. They don't know the names of animals in their own language. They can't carry on a conversation with their grandparents because the grandparents use big words, right? So these are all the signs of language slippage, and it's taking hold in Tshakashue in particular, and people are very complacent about it. And they'll wake up and find themselves in a situation of many First Nations across Canada where, before they know it, there's only people older than 40 years old that can speak the language. I work in a number of these communities in Northern Ontario, right, where there's nobody under 40 that still speaks the language. And that day will arrive in Tshakashue eventually, unless people fight ferociously to defend their language. And toponymy is a small part of that. Yeah.
Peter, I have a question, I guess, about sort of this dynamic nature of naming.
Yeah.
Many of the examples that you gave were names that seem to date sort of early to mid 20th century, maybe some that were earlier.
And even more recent.
And even more recent. Well, this is my question. I'm wondering in the 500 odd that you have, what percentage of them are ancient names, and is this a process that still continues? Are there new names that are emerging?
You're astute to pick up on that. I haven't done a calculation. It's kind of hard to figure that out. There's There's easily a couple dozen that seem to be, more recent origin. And I'm of the view that reinvention of place names in the Aboriginal language, continuous process of renaming is a healthy sign of land use. That when place names get fixed, and stuck in concrete, that could be the sign of like no land use. It becomes folklore at that point. And I think the same thing applies to, toponyming processes everywhere, on the island of Newfoundland, for example, right? People have experiences on the land. They may not know the original name, and they invent it, or they displace an older name, right? And there are evidently some names that are very old, like Tshakashue, for example, which is a contraction of Tshakashue Shaju. I mean, that turns up in French merchant records in the 1700s. It means the Great Opening, and historically it referred to the entire western end of Lake Melville, not the community location where Tshakashue is now. So we have a combination of very old names. I think they tend to be the macro toponyms, like the names for big features. And then we have all these more recent names, and some of them can be very, very funny or humorous. There's lakes named after people's dogs, and all kinds of funny events. And you have to consider as well, like the effect of epidemic diseases, where say 50% of the population gets wiped out because of smallpox or Spanish influenza, and so you have a whole group of people with the expertise in a particular part of the territory, right? They're gone. Their knowledge of the toponymy gets wiped out as well. And then we have, distant relatives reoccupy that area. They don't know all of the place names. They maybe know the names for the bigger features. And then we start the process all over again of reinventing new names based on their everyday experiences for these features. So I know that's a very long-winded response, but does that go any distance to answering your question?
Yeah. Have you found places where there are then layered names, where there is sort of an old name and a new name?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
There is a place near Muskrat Falls. It's now called Motion to Be. That was renamed, even though the people there know the older name, and know the individual that lake was named after. That pond was named after originally. Motion to Be means like Moose Lake. So, and sometimes there can be some confusion because some members of some families have one name for a feature and people in other families have the other name, and so you don't know exactly what they're talking about when you're talking about some activity at that particular location. So, place names can compete with one another as well. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, Joan.
If I understand you right, you're saying that people who are not Innu can be it's your theory that we can be very useful in this process if we use some of these local names.
Yeah.
The other way that occurs to me of improving the retention of the old languages and this as well would be sort of throwing money at it and various kinds of programs. Which do you think is the most effective?
Well, there's certainly a need in the schools for more culturally relevant, curriculum, and that does take some money. But it's kind of a combination between, I guess, collectives, structural solutions, where money can play a role, but also personal responsibility. And people have to make an effort in their own daily lives to use their language. And there are people who make choices every day too, not to use the Innu names in favor of an English name, like the Outpost Program Coordinator. That's the fellow who runs the program in Tshakashue that takes people out to the country. He consistently uses the English place names. And part of the reason for that, even though he knows all the Innu place names, part of the reason for that is because he's dealing with bush pilots. So he got a bush pilot, he wants him to go, he wants to take that family to, he can't say Uapamekushtu because that seems to go in one ear and out the other. He's got to say, take him to No Name Lake, and the bush pilots know what he's talking about. So many of these sort of bush pilot names or chopper pilot names have already sort of, like, you know, they're quite popular in Labrador. Everybody, or a lot of people know where No Name Lake is. Do you know where No Name Lake is?
No, it must be, is it Southern Labrador, is it?
Yes, Southern
Yeah.
Labrador. Do you know the area south of Lake Melville all that well?
Not very much, no.
Yeah. But, and so then by and by, like nobody, you know, people forget the name Uapamekushtu, and you know, what's the Innu name for that, for No Name Lake, and people are scratching their heads, and then the younger people, they never do learn it. If they go with their parents to the country, they'll know it is No Name Lake. Right? So in that sense, there's a certain amount of, you know, individual responsibility to keep the tradition, to keep the knowledge alive, and you know, no outsider can you know, can intervene in that process, I don't think. So it's kind of complicated. Anything else?
Any other questions? Well, thank
Yeah,
you very
Roberta,
much.
one more.
What about the map makers? Because I noticed in Quebec they've gone back to Aboriginal names on the maps. You know, like Rupert House now was Tshakashue.
Yeah.
So could the people who are actually responsible for making the maps and putting the names on them, could they also influence?
Well, I think that certainly helps. And Gordon behind you, Gordon Hancock, is the chair of the Newfoundland Labrador Geographical Names Board. And they've been very supportive of all of this work in various ways. And we really appreciate that support. And so they are very welcome to the Innu submitting the place names for officialization. And of course, it's all caught up in the land claims negotiations as well. The different categories of land that are being negotiated, the different rules and regulations will apply for the various names. But I think the Geographical Names Board has shown great wisdom in its open-mindedness in, you know, recognizing the fact that these place names are part of the, you know, the heritage of the entire province. And they are now, correct me if I'm wrong, Gordon, but you have policies that allow for dual names, for example. So it's not a question of kicking out an existing you know, place name that's known to everybody in Labrador and replacing it with some exotic Innu place name. But where we're going to start to see a difference, I think, will be very practical things like the name that goes up on a road sign on the new section of the Trans-Labrador Highway. And you know, that takes us to, you know, the Department of Transportation as well, and, you know, their rules for road signage and legibility and so on and so forth. It gets a little complicated, but we need some open-mindedness on their part as well. And you know, I've had some discussions with Randy Hawkins, who is its title is the Toponym Information Officer and Secretary to the board, and we developed a kind of lay pronunciation guide for the newly officialized Innu place names for 4 names on the Trans-Labrador Highway between Goose Bay and Cartwright. Okay, and to make it easier for folks to pronounce them, like one of the names is Uapamekushtu, which means salmon brook, basically salmon river small. Right. So the thing that stumped so many of us is, a lot of us right off the bat, is that TSH at the beginning of these words, like, or near the beginning of words like Tshakashue, you know, the TSH, that's pronounced ch as in cheese. So you have to know something about Innu orthography. But when, you know, the people are zipping along the Trans-Labrador Highway and they see Uapamekushtu, you know, like it looks like somebody scrambled the alphabet on a road sign, right? So we, you know, Randy's proposed to Transport that they put some kind of English phoneticized version of that on the roadside to help people out. But I'm not sure yet whether Transport is going to accept that